Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. Codependency was originally coined to describe the dysfunctional relationship that developed between addict alcoholics and their significant others. Over time, it has come to be best defined by the Scottsdale definition of codependence. Codependence is a pattern of painful dependence on compulsive behaviors and on approval from others in an attempt to find safety, self-worth, and identity. Recovery is possible.
Hello? Oh, hi, Mom. We forgot pantyhose? You mean you forgot pantyhose? Okay, I'll pick you up some. Taupe, right? Okay. Listen, did you give Daddy the butter cookies I picked out specially for him? Did you say they were from me? Do you like them? What about the AA pamphlet? Did he see it? Threw it away? Never mind. It's useless. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Now, basically, this definition of codependence seems like everyone, particularly women raised in Western culture. But tonight, we will be very careful to apply the symptoms and behaviors we discussed to individuals who have lost themselves in the process. It is an important differential because having a trait is not the same thing as having a syndrome. To help us gain a clear picture of how codependence actually looks as a behavioral pattern, we have Ginny Jameson, a KDAC counselor and interventionist here in the San Jose area. And Ginny is actually rejoining us. I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you were able to join us this evening.
Me too.
Now, when you saw the clip initially, I wondered, as a codependency expert, did anything in there look particularly familiar to you?
Yes, very familiar. Yes, and it's getting involved with other people's problems, taking responsibility for other people, and totally losing yourself in them. You know. A lot of codependent people will say to me, well, wait a minute, you know, I don't want to not be loving and supportive to people in my life. And that's not what codependency, that's not what we're talking about. We can be loving and supportive without taking on responsibilities for other people and living our lives through them.
You know, I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's a very common statement, which is, what's the difference between being helpful, you know, and being codependent? Is it codependent because I decided to go to the movie my husband picked, even though I didn't really want to go? You know, where do we draw that line?
Right, and there's a very fine line between it a lot of times, and it's really honoring ourselves. And so if you're going to a movie because your husband wants to see it, you let him know that. I'll go because it's something you want to do, and next week we'll do a movie I want to. But it's really being honest about your feelings. And that sometimes we do when we're with somebody we love or with somebody we care about. We may do something that we prefer not to, you know, but because it would be supportive of them, we will do it. But when it's a constant thing, when we don't share that this isn't my favorite thing to do because I love you, I'm going to do it, then we step over the line. We act like it's all fine and we want to do it all, and we're not honest about what's going on.
And I know ultimately that has consequences for us. Right. Let's take a look at some actual behavioral characteristics as defined by Pia Melody in her book, Facing Codependence.
Okay.
She mentions experiencing appropriate levels, that we have difficulty experiencing appropriate levels of self-esteem, difficulty setting functional boundaries, owning and expressing our own reality, taking care of our adult needs and wants, and experiencing and expressing our reality moderately. Okay. I saw some keywords I know that unfortunately are very real for me. We talk about difficulty expressing self-esteem. How do you see that played out with people you work with?
I think that the expressing self-esteem is very difficult, if there is any, you know. Okay. It's really limited. They minimize how they do feel about themselves. But I think in most cases the self-esteem is not there or very, you know, limited. And so they try and get their self-esteem by others, pleasing others, taking care of others, doing for others. And when they're told, thank you, that's good, oh, will you do this for me, will you take care of that, that's how they get their self-esteem. They get it in a way that isn't healthy for them.
Okay, so it's sort of being, if you believe I'm okay, I'm okay. Exactly. And if you do not think I'm okay, then I'm not. So really we're talking about transferring a lot of the locus of our own control, our own power outside of ourselves, which ultimately leaves us pretty vulnerable.
Exactly. What the one key word I saw there too was about reality, and that there isn't a reality about who I am or any of that. And I get it from other people. Other people tell me who I am, so I'm either good or bad by what you think of me, not what I think of myself.
Now, we also saw on our list the word boundaries, and people frequently will come into my practice and say, you know, what is this boundary thing, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I know that there are different types of boundaries. They're, you know, intellectual, emotional, physical.
Right.
In terms of setting limits with other people, in terms of being able to take better care of ourselves, what seems to be difficult about that for people that you work with?
Well, I think for a codependent it's that I don't have the right to set boundaries, that if I do that I'm hurting you, and if I'm hurting you then I'm a bad person. Okay. So if I don't want to do something, I'll do it anyway and not set the limit or the boundary. If you're abusing me verbally, I'll allow that because I'd hurt your feelings if I told you I didn't like what you said to me, or you might get upset. So I tend to judge everything that I'm doing on how it's going to affect you, not me.
Okay.
So there are no boundaries.
In fact, I've even heard it described as I'm not sure where I start and you begin.
Exactly.
So kind of like amoebas.
Right.
You kind of move in and out of each
Right.
other. And so just like the woman who was talking with her mother, and her mother said, we forgot pantyhose, said, oh no, actually you forgot pantyhose. But I think
Right.
the reality for a lot of us who struggle with codependency is we do think actually in the word we.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, particularly if you have trouble with I.
Right, this enmeshed relationship that, you know, is not healthy, but that somehow it is a we. You know, I hear that a lot when parents come in, and it's sort of we. Each one of them speak for we. And
Okay.
so when you try to get, well, can you say I? How do you feel about it? It's very difficult for some of them to do that.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Now, one of the other characteristics that was mentioned has to do with identifying our own needs and wants. Mm-hmm. And that, in fact, I know I've worked with people who have been able to, or feel they're better able to describe somebody else's needs and wants pretty accurately.
Exactly, exactly. It's sort of like looking at when you are talking, if it's always about someone else, or if you know what their favorite meal is or their favorite color, but you're not sure what yours is, you know, that again is totally focusing on taking care of and getting your value through someone else. And, you know, you don't even realize you have a want or a need. Your want and need is for them to get well, or for them to do something different, or, you know, for them to change. It isn't about what you want. So therefore nothing changes because we have no control over another person, only ourselves.
And yet, on the one hand, you know, we're talking about somebody who, you know, as we're talking about, I'm getting a picture of pretty low self-esteem. But, you know, my experience is that often we're also talking about people who present as very strong, responsible, powerful individuals. Mm-hmm. And in fact, part of, I think, recovery has to do with addressing the actual grandiosity of believing that I know all of what's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Sort
Exactly.
of, I know what your colors are. I know everything that
Right.
you need to know.
Mm-hmm. And the grandiosity, exactly what you say. It's like if I'm taking care of you, then doesn't that make me one up? Aren't I doing a better job? You know, if we're talking about whether it be alcoholism or workaholism or gambling or whatever, I'm the strong one. I'm handling the situation. You've got the problem. So even though there is low self-esteem, it does come across as grandiosity. And also, you know, kind of, I always say, like, you know, shine my halo, you know, because I look so good, you know, when I'm doing all that. You know, you've heard, I mean, how many times have you heard, oh, she's just a saint for putting up with him, or he's just a, you know, he's just so wonderful for putting up with her, instead of looking at, well, maybe not. Okay. Maybe they both need to be honest about the situation.
Well, and you know, I'm wondering about the other piece of this, which is the people in a codependent's life that are willing to have somebody do for them and take care of them, and you know, what's up with that half of the equation?
Well, with that half is the addicted half of whatever it would be addicted to, whatever the person's addicted to, whether it's, you know, physical illness, whether it's alcohol or drugs, workaholism, gambling, food, or, you know, there's some dysfunction there in that other person that they need to be taken care of or want to. They choose that. They don't take responsibility for themselves. They're in denial of what is really going on for them. And of course, the codependent helps them stay in denial. Okay. Totally.
Well, you know, and you know, there's so many ways to be, you know, as I'm listening to you, so many ways to be absent and not participate, you know. So it is not just kind of the classic, well, I'm a codependent if I'm married to an alcoholic, but it sounds like basically being in a relationship being willing to be in a relationship with someone who's not able or willing to be a partner.
Right.
If I'm not expecting mutuality, then I have then potentially moved into a situation where codependent behavior could be necessary. Is that that about right? Okay.
Yeah, it is. You just, you know, there's just no the person is not functioning in the way you'd like them to, and so you function more. You're overly responsible. You do whatever it is that they can, and in a real unbalanced way. I mean, like you say, in a relationship that does happen. You're good at one thing, I might be better at another, and we balance each other. But when you're talking about the extreme, where one person is doing, you know, 150% and the other one's doing next to nothing in even at least some areas, then there's, you know, there's a problem there that nobody's looking at.
Yeah. Well, and again, like you said, the defocusing. I mean, particularly if I'm in a relationship with somebody who's not functioning, it is so much more obvious to say, you know, that if I could get this person's problem taken care of, everything would be fine.
Exactly.
Now, the other characteristic that was mentioned was difficulty expressing reality moderately, and I know Pia Melody has talked about this lack of moderate as being one of the most obvious characteristics of codependence to people outside themselves. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, when you say moderately, I mean, one of the things is that people tend to either stuff, and then blow their stack. So either way is not moderately, to not express it at all, or to, you know, to scream and yell. So that's one extreme. And then the other part is that they don't see reality. So what happens is, you know, I'm sure you've seen this, you have a client come in and it's like, things were horrible last week, but everything's wonderful this week because we worked it all out and everything's wonderful. Okay. You know, and by working out, maybe they talked and they got some promises. So, and there's no reality to that. So then, you know, short time after, they're going to come back with everything's awful again. So there is no moderate way of looking at life or reality or what's going on.
So it's kind of living life emotionally, pretty much as on a roller coaster.
Right.
Let's take a quick break. When we return, we will learn more about the symptoms of codependency and some paths to recovery. Stay tuned.